I speak to you in the name of our God, who is Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. Amen. Please be seated. I've really struggled to know what to say this morning. On Monday, I had everything ready. Last Monday, I was prepared to preach on today's texts, on the Old Testament text and the Gospel. And then events in Syria escalated. And I think that as the church, we can't afford to ignore them, and we ought not to ignore them in our preaching, in our proclamation of the Gospel. And they've rather overtaken my mind, and this morning that's what I'll be talking to you about. I spent Friday discussing with a priest in Derby about what I might say, and indeed what he might say. And after many messages back and forth, these were the final words with which he left me. We're all liars and cowards looking for clever things to say. We're all liars and cowards looking for clever things to say. And he said this to me not because he's my enemy, but because he is my dear friend. And I'm a liar this morning because I'm standing here meant to be telling you something of what you're meant to do, and I've got no idea. I've got no idea what to do. And I'm a coward because even if I did know what to do, I'm not sure I'd have the courage to do it. The problem is that the things that I feel are within my power, prayer and raising money and resources, they seem so banal. How can I warrant sitting in prayer when something needs to be done right now? How can I give money when the standard that Christ holds me to is like that of the rich young man? And yet when I consider that radical solution, selling everything you have and giving the proceeds to the poor, then I think, well, if I told you to do that, I'd be a liar because I'm not sure that is what we should all do. And I'd be a coward because I'm not sure I'd have the courage to do it. So I offer you my honest impotence. I don't know what to do. The scenes have been terrifying and sickening, and I don't feel like I'm powerful enough to make any significant change. There was a moment where I thought I'd be preaching this sermon to you in the shadow of our armed forces preparing to take military action. And that is one thing for which I am thankful that our parliamentarians voted to avoid that. I stand as a Christian to say that we cannot fight violence with violence. It was 50 years ago that Martin Luther King, 50 years ago last Wednesday, on the 28th of August, he stood and addressed the people in Washington, and he addressed the entire world about the violence that he and his fellow African Americans were facing and the justice that he sought. And at the beginning of his speech, in a part that we don't hear very often, he said these words: "But there is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. And that still rings true today. If as Christians we meet violence with violence, we lose. We lose because either we're too weak, or even worse, we're too strong. And if we're too strong, all we've managed to do is be more violent than the person who's violent in the first place. And our redemptive story is this one. It's about a man, Jesus Christ himself, God incarnate, facing violence and succumbing to it. The violence of death. And then that most wondrous of miracles, resurrection. Christ being resurrected, thereby eradicating death's sting. We're all liars and cowards looking for clever things to say. Clever things to say because, of course, it's all already been said. As a Christian, I have two answers to what to do about Syria. One of them is that which I've said already, that I don't know. I don't know what to do except the seemingly insignificant acts of prayer and charity. And the other answer is this slightly peculiar one. Live godly lives, be more virtuous. But what has that got to do with Syria? Well, the same thing it's got to do with all evil. What's happening in Syria is evil, but we know that there will be no evil in the realm of God. And Christ has taught us about the realm of God, how to be godly people, how to act with virtue. And in God's realm, there will be an end of pain and suffering. As the writer of Revelations tells us, "And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them, they will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away.'" Some people might be asking this morning and over this period, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do about the conflict in Syria? I think perhaps we should be asking, what has Jesus done? That's the big solution. I can't erase the sin of the world. I can't cure the world of its evils, and neither ought I to try. But as a Christian, I stand in the sure and certain belief that Christ's birth, his life, his death, and his resurrection absolves me of my sin and defeats death. We live in the hope of God's realm. Every day I pray, "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come." Jesus' victory over death is the answer for Syria, just the same as it's the answer for evil everywhere in our world. But until then, until the realm comes, until we celebrate that time where we are God's people, where we wipe away every tear, where there is no more pain and suffering, until then, I make what little effort I can. So I'll be here at 4 o'clock today and every day this week, holding a vigil for Syria and the people of Syria, and I welcome you to come and join me. Amen.